All right, hello class. This lesson for today is on grammar as rhetoric and style, specifically focusing on cumulative, periodic, and inverted sentences. So the point of today's presentation will focus on a style of writing that is going to be expected of you in your narrative. So make sure you are paying attention, make sure you're focused, make sure that you are looking at the different styles of sentences in order to incorporate that into your own narrative, because that's going to be the expectation. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So most of the time, a lot of people tend to, and what I'm seeing in a lot of students is writing simple sentences. So here is some examples of simple sentences where you just have the subject and the verb, or the subject, the verb, and the subject complement. So here an example would be I cried, simple subject, simple verb, subject, verb, subject complement, even though the streams were now lifeless, and the subject, verb, and direct object, we believed her. Very simple. So what we want to try to do in our narratives and just in our writing in general is to make our sentences longer. And the way we do this is to coordinate two or more standard sentences together by using a subordinate sentence pattern. So this is a coordinating pattern. It says, yet every one of these disasters has actually happened somewhere, and many real communities have already suffered a substantial number of them. So this is called a coordinating pattern. So we've coordinated the two smaller sentences using a conjunction and combining them, or subordinating one pattern to another. And when they arrived on the edge of Mercury, they carried all the butterflies of a summer day in their wombs. So again, taking two sentences and combining it together to make a longer sentence. So the downside with standard sentence patterns or coordinating them, sometimes it becomes a little bit monotonous. So we want to break out of the monotony in terms of our writing and use cumulative, periodic, and inverted sentences. And these are types of sentences that you can use within your narrative essays. So when you're using one of these sentence patterns, you need to call attention to that sentence. It contrasts significantly with the patterns of sentences around it. It's an unusual sentence pattern and can emphasize a point, control a sentence rhythm, increase tension, and create a dramatic impact. And it also helps to spice up your paper a little bit, and it kind of breaks up the monotony in your writing when we tend to write the same type of sentences over and over and over again. All right, so here's the first type, a cumulative sentence. So a cumulative sentence begins with a standard sentence and adds multiple details after it. All right, so these can be subordinate clauses or different kinds of phrases, and these details can pile up, making it a cumulative sentence. So let's look at an example. The women moved through the streets as winged messengers, twirling around each other in slow motion, peeking inside homes and watching the easy sleep of men and women. So here you have your standard sentence, followed by a comma. Now, all these additions after it, if you notice, these are all verbs ending in ing. This is what makes it a cumulative sentence. We added these subordinate clauses after the standard sentence, which makes it a cumulative sentence. All right, again, we have grown into everywhere. Here is your standard sentence, followed by a comma, spreading like a new growth over the entire surface, touching and affecting every other kind of life, incorporating ourselves. So what we need to do here, or what the writer's done here in this example, again, adding subordinate clauses, verbs ending in ing, that normally cannot stand alone as a sentence, but is considered an addition to the sentence. So here we have 1, 2, 3 additions to this standard sentence, making it a cumulative sentence. All right, the next example is called a periodic sentence. The periodic sentence begins with multiple details, and it holds off on the standard sentence pattern until the end. So this is kind of the reverse. So the example here And this is, you would think this is considered a run-on sentence because here's the beginning and here's the end. So it says human beings, large terrestrial metazoans, fired by energy from microbial symbionts lodged in their cells, instructed by tapes of nucleic acid stretching back to the earliest live membranes, informed by neurons essentially the same as all the other neurons on Earth, sharing structures with mastodons and lichens living off the sun, are now in charge running the place for better or worse. So here you have all these multiple details. And if you notice, the subject starts here. And it actually, if we take this part of the sentence and combine the last part of the sentence, these two can be a sentence in itself. Human beings are now in charge running the place for better or worse. But here you have all these additions, which provides essential more details to the subject. So you see how each one is broken and added, and here they're all separated by commas. And each component, well, for the most part, starts with a verb. All right, so that's a periodic sentence. All right, and then we have an inverted sentence. An inverted sentence is a standard sentence that has a subject come before the verb, and a writer may choose to invert the sentence by placing the verb before the subject. So here you have in the woods is perpetual youth. Now, the reason why this is inverted is because the verb is coming before the subject. So you're describing the place here, and then you say is perpetual youth. This could have easily been written perpetual youth is in the woods, but they wrote it as in the woods is perpetual youth. It slows the reader down because it's simply more difficult to comprehend an inverted sentence because of the order. So you have to really look at the sentence and try to figure out what the author is saying. So that's another style of writing. All right, so here's the practice. And because this is practice, what you're going to do is you're going to look at the examples and try to figure out, are these sentences cumulative, inverted, or cumulative, inverted, or periodic. So let's look at some examples. So number one, you're going to write down multiple choice. Is this cumulative, inverted, or periodic? So number one says, similarly, chemicals sprayed on croplands or forests or gardens lie long in soil, entering into living organisms, passing from one to another in a chain of poisoning and death. 2. Among them are many that are used in man's war against nature. 3. I see the spectacle of morning from the hilltop over against my house, from daybreak to sunrise, with emotions which an angel might share. 4. Not less excellent, except for our less susceptibility in the afternoon, was the charm last evening of a January sunset. 5. When a noble act is done, perchance in a scene of great natural beauty, when Leonidas and his 300 martyrs consume one day in dying, and the sun and moon come each and look at them once in the steep defile of Thermopylae, when Arnold Winkelried in the high Alps under the shadow of the avalanche gathers in his side a sheaf of Austrian spears to break the line for his comrades, are not these heroes entitled to add the beauty of the scene to the beauty of the deed? 6. Regret, maybe you'll consider. 7. How to get power is what they're thinking. 8. What's at stake as they busy themselves are your tax dollars and mine, ultimately our freedom too. All right, so with those examples and with this presentation, the expectation is that you will try to incorporate at least cumulative sentences or maybe perhaps inverted and periodic sentences in your narrative. So you have to kind of think of ways, how can I create a cumulative sentence? How can I start a sentence with a standard sentence and then put a comma and add some verbs and some more details to that sentence to mix up my writing so it doesn't become monotonous and boring, and to create it more from a stylistic perspective. So I hope you're able to apply those. Make sure you answer the multiple choice questions in the form. And until next time, have a good evening.